Good morning. It is a great sunny day to be here. I know we've got some people that are having a fun 3-day weekend somewhere, and God will chastise them later for not being here. We are wrapping up our Grace Can series today. We're finishing up. So I'm going to ask you a weird question. Maybe it's weird, maybe it's not, but what is your relationship with complaining? I mean, is it always right there on the tip of your tongue? Do you tend to complain sometimes? Would your closest friends, maybe your family, describe you and your relationship with complaining differently than you would describe yourself? And what about gratitude? Are you more likely to complain, or are you more likely to express thankfulness? In my first year of youth ministry, I wanted to take my kids on a mission trip where they would get out of their comfort zone and see life a little bit differently so that they would have a better appreciation for what they had. Our church was in a little town of 80 people in west central Illinois, and we were going to go help launch a church plant in a Chicago suburb. Might as well have been on Mars for these kids. Leading up to the trip, though, I was really careful. I was talking to the students all the time about watching their emotions and to be careful in expressing negative energy. Basically, what I meant when I was saying all that was a real polite way of saying, no complaining, right? So we had to do all kinds of things that week, including we did things like neighborhood canvassing, making cold phone calls, and we worked on their offices that they would use during the week because their campus was going to be meeting for worship at a school. And when the leader of all this was explaining the tasks to all the things that we had to do, one of them was painting. Now, I don't know about you, but there are some chores I don't mind doing and some chores I really don't like. I don't mind doing laundry. I hate doing the dishes. Well, I could make a list, but in this instance, he said painting, and you know what? I hate painting, right? I don't like the way that wet, sticky, disgusting paint feels on my skin. I just don't like it. So when he said painting, I piped up right away and said that I hated painting and I'd be happy to do anything else. Now, my 23-year-old mind didn't think anything of it, but one of my youth sponsors was also an elder at the church. And when we got back, after the trip was over, he confronted me about my complaining right in front of the kids. And you know what? I felt terrible. I was so guilty of the thing that I warned them of over and over again. So innocently thinking, what is your relationship with complaining? Because we've covered a lot of things in this series on grace. But what we've done is we've ignored one of grace's natural enemies, and that's the complaint. The grace that you've received should cause you to have gratitude. Complaining looks like a lack of appreciation for grace. Gratitude is an act of grace. It's a response to the grace that you've already received, and it's giving grace forward. It's thankfulness. But for us, complaining is such a natural behavior that there's a good chance this enemy of grace is active in your life. Not only does it fight against the grace that you've received, but it also causes God, potentially, to stop blessing you. So go all the way back to the Old Testament, the beginning. In Genesis chapter 12, there's this guy, you may have heard of him. It's the interaction with God and with a man named Abraham. He tells him, you're going to go somewhere to a land that I'm going to show you, and I'm going to make you into a great nation. I'm going to bless you. Those are all great promises, right? And God does. God begins building a nation from this one man and his wife. And it takes a long time. Generations pass. Hundreds of years later, Abraham's family has become a nation, and they're called the Israelites. But they're a struggling people, because it hasn't been easy for them. In fact, they're now living in a land, they're now not living in the land that God had promised them, but in a place called Egypt. And they were slaves. And they've grown into this great nation, but they're oppressed by a nation that's even greater. And so God goes and finds a leader, a man named Moses, to help free these people from Egypt. Yeah, you like the particular Moses picture I found up there? Charlton Heston, right? And he makes a promise to Moses that sounds a lot like the promise that he made to Abraham, okay? In Exodus 3, he says that he's going to bring these Israelites, this nation, up out of the land, Egypt, into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And God does. He frees this massive nation of Israel, we think approximately about 2 million people, and they begin to make their trek towards this promised land. And it feels like grace, an incredible grace to be rescued from these oppressors of hundreds of years. And maybe, as we've gone through this series, you've been able to look back on your life a little bit and see what you've been rescued from. It feels like incredible grace. Maybe for you as an individual, you can say that you're not an addict anymore. That's grace. Maybe you can say that your relationships aren't toxic anymore. That's grace. Maybe you can say that your financial struggles aren't as oppressive as they used to be. That's grace. Maybe you can say that your bitterness and your anger don't rule your life anymore. That's grace. And that grace should lead to an incredible amount of gratitude. If you can see where you were and how far you've come, surely gratitude will follow. Now, surely this nation of slaves that has now been freed is going to live happily in the joy of their newfound freedom and celebrate this incredible grace that they've received. Surely gratitude definitely marks them and their attitudes. Well, 3 days later, just 3 days after making it out of Egypt, the people are complaining because they don't have water. They found water, but they can't drink it, and so they start complaining. And look, I get it. It kind of makes sense to me. Why is it that they were freed from Egypt just so they could find their way into the desert and then die of thirst? They're going somewhere, but until they get there, it's just desert. Really hard, difficult place to live. And God hears them, right? And God knows they need water, so he gives them water. But there was, unfortunately, a pattern starting to develop among this nation. If you do the math, about 45 days after they've been originally freed, the nation is now grumbling against God again. It says that the whole nation grumbled against Moses. They're hungry, and they're not just grumbling against Moses, but also against God. And they're so wrapped up in their complaints that they start misremembering their past. They're pretending like their time in Egypt wasn't really that bad. They're remembering the food and the water and the drinks that they had in Egypt. And they started telling the story of their time in Egypt as if it was some amazing, wonderful experience, forgetting the whole slave part, leaving that out. They're forgetting where they came from, and all they can see is their current moment. So God miraculously gives them manna, which is kind of a form of bread. But they don't say thank you to God for this. Instead, they grumble. In Numbers 11, we're told they begin to complain about the lack of meat. And God has reached his limit with these jokers, okay? God responds really harshly. God tells him, I'll give you meat, right? I'll give you good stuff to eat. I'm going to give you quail every day. So much of it, in fact, that you're going to eat it until it comes out of your nose. Incredible, vivid imagery from the Lord right there. God takes our grumbling personally, I think. He graciously provides for his children, but instead of noticing and being grateful, the people complain. Grumbling, complaining, guys, is the natural enemy of grace because it overlooks the greatness of the grace that we've already received. It's looking so closely at the exact situation or circumstances that you're in that you're forgetting about anything outside of it. All that you can see is specific, this tight little spot that God isn't gracing you exactly the way that you wanted to be graced at the exact time that you wanted him to have it done. You're refusing to let yourself see anything outside of the experience, and so you forget all of the other ways that he's gotten you to where you are right now. And as Jesus followers, this is a really big deal because it isn't just about us. It ruins our witness to the world around us. Grumbling and complaining, they undermine the good news of the gospel and ignore the generosity and the faithfulness of our God. It's why Paul speaks directly to this in the New Testament in the book of Philippians. He writes to that church and says, do everything without complaining or arguing. Now, we could spend some time talking about what he means with that arguing word, but I'm going to skip past that and focus on the complaining part today, okay? Do everything without complaining so that you become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a crooked and depraved generation. The world around you is a crooked and depraved place. And if we grumble, if we complain, it causes us to look just like the crooked and depraved generation around us. But we're not supposed to be like the world around us. We have something that the rest of the world should want. We should live so differently that it causes people to be drawn to it. That's what Paul says. He goes on, do everything without complaining so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a crooked and depraved generation, so that you can shine like stars in the universe as you hold out the word of life. Let me tell you something. If you're a complainer, then your star isn't very shiny. There's nothing attractive to the world around you in how you're living and how you're behaving, if that's you. If you're a complainer, the word of life that you live by doesn't look appealing. There's nothing attractive about the world around you if you live with that kind of attitude. And if I'm honest, I've probably had plenty of seasons of complaining in my life, times when I wasn't sure about my career choices, or times when I was experiencing physical ailments, times when I found myself in dire financial straits, and most of those were my fault. And then there are things that weren't my fault, but I still found myself a complainer. I think about, especially the beginning, the COVID period. I complained constantly, all the time. Here's the thing. As long as my attitude was like that, I was hurting my opportunity to minister to the people that I was supposed to be serving all week. My negative attitude was beginning to influence the people around me. I needed that wise elder to call me out like he did in that mission trip when I was a kid. Because it's dangerous and toxic to the gospel when we complain. And we can push it even farther than that. I will say it. Complaining is blasphemous. When I'm complaining, it's as if I'm saying, I don't believe that God's taking care of me. It's as if I'm saying, I don't believe that he's going to keep his promises and that he can't redeem what I'm going through in this moment. Complaining is the refusal to trust God and to acknowledge his grace in your life. Whining is the natural enemy of worship. It's the opposite. When we whine, we're doing the opposite of worshiping. Complaining is the rival of grace. Now, maybe you don't think so, right? Maybe you would say it differently. Maybe you would say thankfulness or gratitude is the opposite of complaining, but grace and thanksgiving are so closely related. When we pray before a meal, we call it saying grace, don't we? Because being thankful is expressing the graces we've received, and complaining is the rival of grace. And it is such a big deal, guys. It's why God actually commands us to have gratitude. In 1 Thessalonians 5, Paul says, be joyful always, pray continually, and give thanks in all circumstances. That's a huge statement, isn't it? It sounds to me like that's a directive. It's straightforward language there. It's not an invitation. It's instructive. It's a command. Give thanks. And he doesn't give room for any excuses here, does he? There aren't any exemptions to the rule, no exclusions to this command. It says in all circumstances. All includes everyone, just in case you're wondering what all means. Any situation that you find yourself in, you give thanks. It is not a suggestion. Why? You always hear why, especially if you got a 3-year-old at home. Why? I always like to ask the question because sometimes we talk about God as if he's just some guy up there that's spouting out these arbitrary rules. As if he's picking on us, making us miserable, making us do stuff that we don't want to do. Why would God demand that we be grateful? Why would God demand for us to show gratitude in all circumstances? It's almost as if God is smart and he knows how we're designed. Let me tell you something. Research has found this. Research has found it's proven that the more we complain, the more we find things to complain about. There was a study, and they assigned 2 different groups different objectives. One group was assigned to journal their irritations and write the things down that bothered them. And another group was assigned a journal of thanksgiving. Every day they had to write down things that they were thankful for. And what they found was that over time, those who were writing about thankfulness and gratitude had greater overall energy and enthusiasm. They slept better. They were less depressed. Those who were keeping track of the things that annoyed them were completely the opposite. Because complaining causes us to become increasingly obsessed with our less than perfect circumstances. It turns out, guys, complaining is bad for us and gratitude is good for us. God's smart, right? Gratitude is not dependent on circumstances. The ability to be thankful, the ability to be grateful has nothing to do with the situation that you're currently in. Gratitude recognizes that God's grace is reason enough to be thankful in all circumstances. And what's fascinating about this research is that they were assigned to do this journal intentionally. They were told that they had to do this. But what happened was that all the participants on both sides began doing the work unintentionally, because what we intentionally focus on becomes easier and easier to give our attention to. People who are annoyed tend to become more annoyed. People who are grateful tend to become more grateful, because what you focus on is what you become. The danger is that grumbling, like grace, has a way of becoming the lens through which we look at life. If you focus on things to complain about, you're going to miss all the ways that God is truly already blessing you. And God takes it personally. It's not some tiny little small thing when we complain. It's as if we are ignoring what he's already done. So how do we fix it? How can we become more gracious with gratitude? Well, I'll start with this. You can start by keeping a gratitude journal. I haven't always been the journal type of person my whole life. I've done it a few different times in my life, and I found it to be very powerful. Now, I try and do it almost every day. And if you know you've got to grow in gratitude, I challenge you to write down 3 to 5 things every day that you're just thankful for, even if they're small. They don't have to be big. Just find small little things you can be grateful for. Something as simple as a good meal or a kind word. Just like the study we referenced earlier, I promise you, if you start with intention, you will find gratitude every single day. And it becomes easier and easier to do. It's going to become natural, and you're going to see a change in yourself as well. As a matter of fact, Rosemary has championed this here in our church in the past, and she will be making an announcement about this at the end of our service today. Maybe you need to start practicing the expression of thanks. What would it look like if you challenged yourself to say thank you to 3 different people every single day for something? Tell people that you appreciate them. It could be a friend or a coworker or a stranger or anybody. But if you verbalize gratitude every single day, it's going to strengthen your relationship with those people, I guarantee it. It's also going to reinforce your thankfulness. You're going to start looking for more things to say thank you for. What you focus on, you will become. Maybe you need to express it through the form of prayer. Thankfulness, gratitude is a key and significant part of prayer. And if you sense that you've been ungrateful to your God, it would probably be good for you to practice just saying thank you to him. Finding the things you can say thank you for and appreciating him. I think it can almost be like an anchor to your entire gratitude routine if you start it that way. Or maybe you need to change your perspective. We talked about that some today. We need to change our perspective when it comes to things that we do complain about. Maybe you need to reframe the challenges that you're facing in your life. If you've become so locked in on the struggle and the pain, you're going through in this moment, maybe instead of dwelling on the negatives, you've got to switch. You've got to intentionally switch to something positive. Maybe you can ask the question, what can I learn in this current season of my life? Or even in the midst of this, what else is still good in my life? What else is going in a way that I can see God is still blessing me? It can build resilience. It's going to build gratitude. It begins to feed itself. One thing you can do, though, is to cut out comparison, all right? You've got to limit that. You've got to get rid of it. I think this is one of the reasons why we as a culture, we have become less thankful and less gracious. With the rise of social media, we live in a world where everything is a comparison to everyone else. And it kills us on the inside, whether we admit it or not. It takes from us. And we begin measuring our lives against the people around us. And we see what we don't have. We see the vacation that we don't get to take, the car that I don't get to drive, the house that I don't have. We see all those things, and it builds discontentment in us. Limit comparisons. It is going to kill you. Focus on your own blessings and reduce your envy. And another thing that you can do that was proven to work for a very long time is serving. There's a different level of gratefulness in people who serve or sacrifice for the sake of somebody else. You can do it through a charity. You can do it through the church here. But it's amazing how small acts can change your perspective and how it can deepen your own appreciation. And finally, why don't you try to reverse engineer God's grace in your life? Kyle Idleman, who wrote the book Grace is Greater, we've been digging through here, tells a story of how a nasty bathroom in a restaurant led him to becoming the preacher of the largest church in America, Louisville, Southeast Christian Church. One decision set off a chain of events that put him in a position where he ended up. Rosie, you guys come on. I can look back at my life and see that some of the most difficult, my hardest, the times when I complained the most, the times when I cried out to God the most, I can now see those as moments where being used by God to bring me to the place where I am sitting here before you today. In a season where I couldn't figure out what God was up to, I can now look back and see all the ways that he was blessing and setting up what was next for me. Sometimes it's hard to see anything other than what you're facing in your life at this exact moment. Gratitude is all about changing your perspective. Complainers and grumblers focus on themselves. Complainers and grumblers focus on the moment right in front of them, and they tend to lose the big picture. But when we come to Jesus, we call that conversion, don't we? Meaning that we change. Conversion means replacing old material with new. It's better material. The old me loved to complain because the old me was about me. But when I convert to Jesus, my focus changes and becomes, it's not about me anymore. It's about Jesus. And I refocus. And people who are grateful always focus away from themselves. Guys, we have to change our focal point. It's going to change your attitude. So don't focus on your circumstances. Focus on God, on how God can use those circumstances. And the more you feed your gratitude, the more gracious you become and the easier that it gets. It's so good and healthy for you. Guys, it's hard, but I promise you it's worth working through.
Father, as we come to this time where decisions are made, help us remember that you lead us to make decisions for change. May we use this time as an offering to bring to you whatever needs to be changed, that you can begin the work.
You know, I think my natural personality might be to be the biggest complainer in this room. People see me and say, how you doing? I'm like, man, it's been a rough one today. Instead of, I can't imagine how much God's going to bless the rest of my day, right? That's just my tendency to do that. And it can bring down people around me. Raheem asked me this morning how I was doing. I said, man, I could use a nap. I'm tired already. It just flows out of me, right? I have to learn to be more gracious, to be more intentional about the things that fall out of my mouth, about the smile on my face, the way I greet people. If I'm going to minister to a lost and hurting generation, and when I say that, that applies to you too. You are all ministers of the gospel when you accepted that call. When you decided to make him Lord of your life, that makes you a minister of the gospel. And so when you're interacting with people, what do they see? Do they see the grumbler like I can be sometimes? Or do they see somebody that's so filled with joy because of the love and the compassion and all the things that God has replaced in your life? Because we all have dark garbage in our life that he has made clean, don't we? That's addictions or all, broken relationships, poor decisions, sinful lives that we couldn't seem to give up. God replaces all that stuff. And am I a person that walks around with happiness because that stuff is gone? Or am I a person that just can't forget how miserable I've been? It makes a difference to the world around us. I encourage you this morning to think about that. If you have some things in your life that you know you've been grumbling about and you need to let that go, I encourage you, come up here. I would love to see some folks up here at these steps praying to leave that there, saying, I don't want this anymore. I'm leaving it behind me, and I'm going to stop using this as a crutch. I'm going to turn to the grace and the goodness of God, and I'm going to be thankful for the way he's gotten me through it. If you don't know who Jesus is, you've never accepted him as your Savior, you have no idea what that means, but you know you need him, I encourage you to come up during this time of invitation as we sing. Would you stand with us?